Welcome everyone to another Sunday night, not live, pre-recorded, but still the life is very much here. This is here on the Living Theosophy channel. We're very excited to have a repeat and one of my very favorite people in the entire world. Petra Meyer has returned. She is the president of the Blavatsky Lodge in London. And tonight we will be talking about the mystery of life. This is a really big deal. Now, although you can't leave real-time comments, you certainly can leave comments, and we will get back to you. We try to answer every question that comes along, and you're always so welcome. So thank you for being here. If you enjoy what you're seeing, please subscribe, please share, please comment, please participate. Click the links down below to find out more and get the free books. There's lots to find out because occultism regards every atom as an independent entity and every cell as a conscious unit. Says HPB, it explains that no sooner do such atoms group to form cells than the latter become endowed with consciousness, each in its own kind, and with free will to act within the limits of law. But what properties must a system have to be called truly living? Can a clear distinction be made between motion and a living system? What does Theosophy tell us about the meanings and beginnings of life and consciousness? And is there support from the scientific community? We have brought Petra Meyer back here on the Living Theosophy channel to tell us way more about it. Petra, welcome back, sweetheart. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
It's so good to have you. I just adore you. Thank you for your time here. And how are you doing? You want to tell everybody, how are you surviving now that we're post lockdown and we're now moving into a new way of being? How are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm all right. You know, we are living a bit on the edge at the moment because I've just moved.
Oh.
With my daughter. We bought an old Victorian house in Greenwich and it needs a lot of restoration. And there's a flat downstairs which I want to extend and refurbish, but you cannot do anything at the moment. You know. It's just starting again. So, you know, all around me is just basic things which I need. So Theosophy is my lifeline.
I know, it's nice to tap into that and realize there's a much bigger picture.
Yeah.
We too are in the middle of restoration, and I'm in the only room that's actually completely finished. Everything else, there's plaster, there's windows missing, there's doors missing, there's floors missing, and so there's begin again next week. So I don't know if it'll ever be finished, but it's certainly an adventure. So how many floors in your Victorian? Do you have 4 floors? 4,
yes. It's a very big house. So we are quite all right in the upper part of the house where my family is. But nothing can be done in the flat downstairs at the moment. So
hopefully very
they're starting in August to replace the windows.
Are you going to take them back to what they once were?
Yeah.
Good. Well, it's exciting. It's nice to know a little bit about you. Again, the president of the Blavatsky Lodge and a very cherished part of my theosophical journey. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get to it. She's put some slides together now. She was actually one of my very first guests, and we were trying to move the slides up on this side as we maneuvered how to do all of this at the beginning of this lockdown. And now look at Zoom has brought the entire world together. We can be together all over the world. So Petra, on her side, is going to bring up her presentation, and I shall say, Petra Meyer, please take it away. Is it possible to make it a little bit littler?
I don't think I can do it. Let's just start. It might be all right.
Okay. All right. We'll go ahead and do that.
Okay.
Take it away, Petra.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the mystery of life, everything is a mystery in life. And Albert Einstein once said something very beautiful. The most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and all science. He to whom this emotion is a stranger, who can no longer pause and wonder and stand wrapped in awe, is as good as dead. His eyes are closed. Lifting the veil and investigating the mysteries of life is the aim of every true philosophy and science. It is the evolution of mind and matter within the illusion of physical reality, the discovery of the essential oneness of all life, and to make the dream of true brotherhood possible through selfless service for the benefit of all, as the Mahatma Kutumi tells us in letter 5. The term universal brotherhood is no idle phrase. Humanity in the mass has a paramount claim upon us. It is the only secure foundation for universal morality. If it be a dream, it is at least a noble one for mankind, and it is the aspiration of the true adept. The famous Indian poet and philosopher Rabindranath Tagore once said, "I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted, and behold, service was joy." In 1913, he was honored with the Nobel Prize in Literature, the first for an Asian poet. The Nobel Prize was presented for lasting literary merit and for evidence of consistent idealism, which is the pursuit of perfection. His collection of poetry, the Gitanjali, and its universal message of harmony were also the focus of an event at UN headquarters in New York at that time, promoting mutual respect and cross-cultural understanding. The term Gitanjali literally means song offering in the Bengali language. Tagore was also very respected by the giants of Western sciences, some of whom personally met him, like Albert Einstein and Werner Heisenberg, for example, who felt quite overwhelmed by the recognition of relativity in the transcendental world, its interconnectedness, and especially its impermanence as fundamental aspects of physical reality in the atomic and subatomic world. And he once said, after these conversations with Tagore, some of the ideas that had seemed so crazy suddenly made much more sense. That was a great help for me. In the Mahatma letters, the Mahatma Kutumi makes a very powerful statement about what happens when the perennial timeless wisdom of the occult sciences about this impermanence or illusion of the manifested world is ignored by mankind. And he said, if for generations we have shut out the world from the knowledge of our knowledge, it is on account of its absolute unfitness. And if, notwithstanding proofs given, it still refuses yielding to evidence, then will we at the end of this cycle retire into solitude and our kingdom of silence once more. We have offered to exhume the primeval strata of man's being, his basic nature, and lay bare the wonderful complications of his inner self, something never to be achieved by physiology or even psychology in its ultimate expression, and demonstrated scientifically. It matters not to them, the men of the world, if the excavations be so deep, the rocks so rough and sharp that in diving into that fathomless ocean, most of us perish in the dangerous exploration. For it is we who were the divers and the pioneers, and the men of science have but to reap where we have sown. It is our mission to plunge and bring the pearls of truth to the surface. Theirs, the scientists, to clean and set them into scientific jewels. And if they refuse to touch the ill-shapen oyster shell, insisting that there is not nor cannot be any precious pearl inside, then shall we once more wash our hands of responsibility before mankind. For countless generations has the adept builded a fane of imperishable rocks, a giant's tower of infinite thought wherein the Titan, the absolute or universal principle, dwelt, and will yet, if need be, dwell alone, emerging from it but at the end of every cycle to invite the elect of mankind to cooperate with him and help in his turn enlighten superstitious men. And we will go on in that periodical work of ours. We will not allow ourselves to be baffled in our philanthropic attempts until that day when the foundation of a new continent of thought are so firmly built that no amount of opposition and ignorant malice will be found to prevail. In an article called The Babel of Modern Thought, published in the Theosophical magazine Lucifer in January 1891, Madame Blavatsky said, "Deny if you can that the most important of our present sciences were known to the ancients. Are not physics and natural sciences but an amplified reproduction of the works of Anaxagoras, of Empedocles, Democritus, and others? All that is taught now was taught by these philosophers then, for they maintained, even in the fragments of their works still extant, that the universe is composed of eternal atoms, which, moved by a subtle internal fire, combine in millions of various ways. With them, this fire was the divine breath of the universal mind. Furthermore, they taught that there was neither life nor death, but only a constant destruction of form produced by perpetual physical transformation." HPB made two very important predictions, one in the Key to Theosophy, that during the last quarter of every 100 years an attempt is made by the masters of wisdom to help with the spiritual progress of humanity. Someone or more persons will appear in the world as their agents, and that a greater or less amount of occult knowledge and teachings will be given out. A second and a very precise one can be found in the Secret Doctrine, where she says that we are at the close of the Aryan Kali Yuga, a Sanskrit term describing the last of the 4 yugas in the ancient Puranas, a collection of symbolical and allegorical writings. Kali means strife, discord, quarrel or contention, symbolizing the Dark Age. She predicted that a large rent will be made in the veil of nature, and that materialistic science would receive a death blow by 1897. Quite a statement.
That is.
But was she right?
Yes.
Every indication that she was. A spark from the ancient occult wisdom has long since penetrated the scientific community, starting exactly at the date she predicted, a development already anticipated in the famous letter by the Mahachohan, which is the chief of all the adepts, containing valuable instructions passed on to some of the principal workers at the very early stage in the development of the Theosophical movement in India. It says right on the first page that the doctrine we promulgate, being the only true one, must, supported by such evidence as we are preparing to give, become ultimately triumphant, like every other truth. Yet it is absolutely necessary to inculcate it gradually, enforcing its theory, unimpeachable facts for those who know, with direct inference, deduced from and corroborated by the evidence furnished by modern exact science. The Mahatma Kutumi also confirmed in the Mahatma Letter 65 that science is our best ally. Exactly in the year 1897, which HPB had predicted, the English physicist Joseph J. Thomson discovered the first subatomic particle, the electron. And out went the theory of an atom as being an indivisible solid building block of matter. For some time it was thought that an atom was a bit like a plum pudding, in which electrons were loosely connected. But only a few years later, Ernest Rutherford discovered that it had a nucleus consisting of protons. The neutrons were discovered some years later by his student James Chadwick. And that the volume of an atom was on an almost empty space. But that was not the end of it either. In 1964, the American physicist and Nobel Prize laureate Murray Gell-Mann discovered that the particles of the nucleus consist of still smaller particles called quarks. And today it is believed that these particles only look like particles, but that they might be tiny vibrating filaments of energy. For example, in physics, a photon is a bundle of electromagnetic energy. In 1900, Max Planck, Nobel Prize laureate and one of the fathers of quantum physics, made the assumption that energy was made up of individual units or quanta. And in 1905, Albert Einstein theorized that not just the energy, but the radiation itself was quantized in the same manner, which he called photons. A photon is not thought to be made up of smaller particles, and is therefore a basic unit of nature, called an elementary particle. Ryan Green, professor of physics at Columbia University in New York, writes in his book, The Elegant Universe, that every particle is surrounded by an electric field, a so-called cloud of electric essence. And the force each particle feels arises through the interaction of their respective force fields by way of literally shooting quanta of lights or photons at each other. That a quanta of light is not so much a transmitter of a force per se, but rather the transmitter of a message, of how the recipient must respond to the force in question. And for this reason, the photon is sometimes referred to as a messenger particle for the electromagnetic force, of which it is the smallest individualized packet. The secret doctrine also tells us that the light of the Logos is a link between objective matter and subjective thought. It is Fohat, the dynamic energy of cosmic ideation, the one instrument with which the Logos works. Albert Einstein said at the beginning of the 20th century, when he formulated his general theory of relativity, that space and time are intertwined, that matter is inseparable from an ever-present quantum energy field, underlying all appearances, which he expressed with his famous words, "We may therefore regard matter as being constituted by the regions of space in which the energy field is extremely intense. There is no place in this new kind of physics for the field and matter, for the field is the only reality. And about our perception of reality from the manifestations in this underlying energy field, he says that this reality is merely an illusion, albeit a very persistent one." This awareness has haunted the scientific community for over a century, when it became obvious that matter is not at all what it seems to be, nor is time. In ancient Hindu philosophy, this power of illusion, which makes phenomenal existence and its perception by finite minds possible, is called Maya, because it is subject to change through decay and differentiation, and which therefore has a beginning and an end. Only that which is changeless and eternal is called Parabrahma in Sanskrit, the secondless or absolute reality, an impersonal principle beyond human speculation. Maya or illusion is an element which enters into all finite things. For everything that exists has only a relative, not an absolute reality. Nothing is permanent except the one hidden absolute existence which contains in itself the noumena of all realities. The existences belonging to every plane of being up to the highest Yanshuans or highest intelligences are, in degree, of the nature of shadows cast by a magic lantern on a colorless screen, Madame Blavatsky referring to Plato's example. But all things are relatively real, for the cognizer is also a reflection, and the things cognized are therefore as real to him as himself. Whatever reality things possessed must be looked for in them before or after they have passed, like a flash, through the material world. But we cannot cognize any such existence directly so long as we have sense instruments, which bring only material existence into the field of our consciousness. These pictures show very easily how easily we can be deluded. The shades look like two faces,
yes,
looking at each other. And also the gaps between the columns look like people,
yes.
facing each other. Whatever plane our consciousness may be acting in, both we and the things belonging to that plane are, for the time being, our only realities. As we rise in the scale of development, we perceive that during the stages through which we have passed, we mistook shadows for realities. And the upward progress of the ego is a series of progressive awakenings, each advance bringing with it the idea that now at last we have reached reality, but only when we shall have reached the absolute consciousness and blended our own with it, shall we be free from the delusion of Maya. Modern science is drawn more every day into the maelstrom of occultism, unconsciously, no doubt, still very sensibly. The two main theories of science, the relation between mind and matter, are monism and materialism, says the secret doctrine. Dr. Amit Goswami, Professor Emeritus of Theoretical Nuclear Physics from the University of Oregon, explains in his book, The Visionary Window, a quantum physicist's guide to enlightenment, a bit deeper what monism is. Spiritual Eastern traditions posit that transcendent consciousness rather than matter is the ground of all being, and that all else is epiphenomena or a side effect. That consciousness is both inside and outside of material space-time reality. As transcendent or outside, it is pure consciousness unmanifest. Immanent or inside, it appears split as self and the world, brought forth by mysterious force called Maya in Hindu philosophy. He describes monistic idealism as Vedanta in accordance with the Upanishads, where it said that only Brahman has reality, while the whole phenomenal world is the outcome of illusion or Maya, the same philosophy as the Tao in China. The proponents of monistic idealism like Vedanta, Plato, Plotinus, for example, point out that their philosophy is based on investigation in its inclusive suchness, because we are that. This profound truth has inspired many scientists. For example, David Bohm, professor of theoretical physics from the University of London, who said in a lecture at the Mystics and Scientists Conference in 1983 that we are only scratching the surface of reality, and that will probably always be the case. We can extend our knowledge, but however far we go, there is always a limit, or the unknown beyond it. It does not look as if knowledge is going to comprehend the ultimate totality of all that is, whatever that may be. We also speculated on a different energy field in space-time implied by quantum theory that is not describable in classical physics at all. This is what he calls a simple implicate order, or a quantum formative field which determines not only the interrelationships of all the particles, but actually their formation. It would have to be described as a multidimensional order which not only acts on the three-dimensional field, but also connects and relates fields in different parts of space and has to be seen as a whole. We would say then that the things that have appeared to us so far are merely on the surface of the whole thing. As we go deeper, we are constantly revealing new features, and that the things that first appear are superficial, merely a display of something deeper. The ultimate principle is unfoldment, which generates time. The possibility of life does not arise from the superficial appearance of things, but from something much deeper. Madame Blavatsky said something very similar in The Secret Doctrine. No Eastern initiate would speak of spheres above us, between the earth and the airs, even the highest, as there is no such division or measurement in occult speech, no above and no below, but an internal within two other withins, or the plane of subjectivity merging gradually into that of terrestrial objectivity. This being for man the last one, his own sphere. Professor Brahmâ maintains that life is organized according to an infinite hierarchy of implicate or directly connected orders. If we take the idea of space as full, that the vacuum is full of energy, then we could say this energy has evolved into various forms through various formative fields. In the poem of the Secret Doctrine, we can read as well that space is neither a limitless void or vacuum, nor a conditioned fullness, but both. On the plane of absolute abstraction, it is the ever incognizable deity which is void only to finite minds. And on that plane of Mayavic perception, it is the plenum or absolute container of all that is, whether manifested or unmanifested. Therefore, that absolute all. When Madame Blavatsky was requested by her students about consciousness and what it is, she gave a very unique description, that the absolute or the attribute and secondless reality is dormant and latent mind. It is absolute consciousness eternally, which consciousness becomes relative consciousness periodically at every manvantaric dawn or new cycle of activity. Let us picture to ourselves this latent or potential consciousness as a kind of vacuum in a vessel, she says. Break the vessel and what becomes of the vacuum? Where shall we look for it? It has disappeared. It is everywhere and nowhere. It is something, yet nothing. A vacuum, yet a plenum, or the absolute container of all that is, whether manifested or unmanifested. But what in reality is a vacuum, she asked. Is not absolute vacuum a figment of our fancy, a pure negation, a supposed space where nothing exists? This being so destroys the vessel, and to our perception at any rate, nothing exists. Therefore, stanza 2 of the Secret Doctrine puts it very correctly. Universal mind was not, because there was no vehicle to contain it. In his book, A Beautiful Question, Finding Nature's Deep Design, Frank Wilczek, Nobel Prize laureate and professor of physics at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, comes to a similar conclusion, that the word vacuum is commonly understood to mean empty space, devoid of matter. That all depends on how hard we are looking. But the vacuum of interstellar space is permeated by a variety of quantum energy fields. That the word vacuum does not refer unambiguously to a definite thing, and that the philosophical concept of void or space as perfect nothingness is quite different from any reasonable understanding of physical space in the present-day physical world. In modern physical cosmology, it's important to take into account that space-filling fields, such as the electromagnetic field, for example, or the newly discovered X field, have profound physical effects, altering the behavior of matter and contributing to dark energy. They are pervasive and inescapable. The behavior of matter within these different vacuums can be drastically different. It is suggestive that space itself is a sort of material that can exist in different phases, just as water can exist as liquid water, ice, or steam. If we look at evolution not only of life, but of matter in general, then matter as a totality is a kind of superintelligence that has inward depths which emanated our bodies, and intelligence as a further development in its totality, says Professor Brahmâ. The same subject is also addressed by the Mahatma Kutumi in letter 90, where he said, the difficulty of explaining the fact that unintelligent forces can give rise to highly intelligent beings like ourselves is covered by the eternal progression of cycles and the process of evolution ever perfecting its work as it goes along. It is one of the elementary and fundamental doctrines of occultism that the two are one and are distinct but in their respective manifestations and only in the limited perception of the world of senses. Our doctrines show but one principle in nature, spirit matter, or matter spirit. The third, the ultimate absolute or quintessence of the two, losing itself beyond the view and spiritual perception of even the gods or planetary spirit. This third principle, say the Vedantic philosophers, is the only reality. Everything else being Maya, Purusha and Prakriti, the Sanskrit words for spirit and matter, have never been regarded in any other light than that of temporary delusion of our senses. The word universe is a bit ambiguous, says Professor Bohm, because it literally means to turn towards the one. So the universe should really be a way of looking and not seen as a thing. He introduces the term soma significant, soma standing for matter or the physical, and significance means meaning. The hyphen between them indicates that they are not really different, but somehow interact. Everything is somatic or physical at its own level, which may be very subtle, and yet it has meaning for what lies beyond or inwardly. This would suggest that the universe could be regarded as the body of the universal mind, says Professor Bohm. The secret doctrine describes the eternity of the universe or space overall as a boundless plane, periodically the playground of numberless universes, incessantly manifesting and disappearing, like a regular tidal lap of flux and reflux. It happens according to the absolute universality of that law of periodicity, which physical science has observed and recorded in all departments of nature. In it, we see one of the absolute fundamental laws of the universe. Professor Goswami, whom I have mentioned before, wrote in his book, The Self-Aware Universe, about another hypothesis concerning the playground of universes or the multiverse and its interaction with an observer, comparing it with what is called superposition in science. Superposition is a principle of quantum theory that describes a challenging concept about the nature and behavior of matter and forces at the subatomic level. The principle of superposition claims that while we do not know what the state of any object in the subatomic world is, it is actually in all possible states simultaneously and potentially, as long as we don't look to check. It is the measurement itself by an observer that causes the object to be singled out and limited to a form out of all the other possibilities. Superposition, supposing that parallel universes of the many worlds theory are not material but archetypal or potential in content, and that they are universes of the mind, then we can say that each observation makes a causal pathway in the fabric of possibilities in the transcendent domain of reality. Once a choice is made, only the one pathway which was chosen does then manifest. All the others are then excluded from the world of manifestation and remain as possibilities or ideals only. A truly cosmological question can now be answered, says Professor Goswami. How has the cosmos existed for the past 15 billion years when there were no conscious observers? He supposes that the universe exists as formless potentia in myriads of possible branches in the transcendent domain and becomes manifest only when observed and manifested by conscious beings. But how does the one undivided consciousness with its possibilities become divided into an experiencing subject and an experienced object? Professor Goswami asked, and quoted one of the great intriguing sentences in the Upanishads. You are that Tattvamasi. But what does Theosophy teach us about the process of manifestation of multiple universes? And does it confirm Professor Goswami's theory that an observer is necessary to make it possible? I think it does. Apart from cosmic substance, cosmic ideation could not manifest as individual consciousness, since it is only through a vehicle of matter that consciousness wells up as I am I. a physical basis being necessary to focus a ray of the universal mind at a certain stage of complexity. Apart from cosmic ideation, cosmic substance would remain an empty abstraction, and no emergence of consciousness could ensue, says Mahatma Kutumi. The technical details of the whole process are given by Madame Blavatsky in the Transaction of the Blavatsky Lodge and the Secret Doctrine, where she says, once we postulate a universal mind, both the brain, the mind's vehicle, and consciousness, its faculty, must be quite different on a higher plane from what they are here. They are near to the absolute all and must therefore be represented by a substance infinitely more homogeneous, something sui generis or unique, and entirely beyond the reach of our intellectual perception. Let us call or imagine it an incipient and incognizable state of primeval differentiations. On that higher plane, as it seems to me, she says, Mahat, the great Manvantaric principle of intelligence, acts as a brain, through which the universal and eternal mind radiates the Ahi, representing the resultant consciousness or ideation. The Ahi, or the Anshoans, or highest intelligences, are the collective hosts of spiritual beings, who are the vehicle for the manifestation of the divine or universal thought and will. They are the intelligent forces that give to and enact in nature her laws, while themselves acting according to laws imposed upon them in a similar manner by still higher powers. But they are not the personifications of the powers of nature, as erroneously thought, says HPB. The Secret Doctrine admits a logos, or a collective creator of the universe, a demiurgos in the sense implied when one speaks of an architect, furnishing the plan. In our case, the plan was furnished by the ideation of the universe, and the constructive labor was left to the hosts of intelligent powers and forces. But that demiurgos is no personal deity, that is an imperfect extra-cosmic God, but only the aggregate of the Dianshuans and other forces. They are dual in their character, being composed of A, the irrational brute energy inherent in matter, and B, the intelligent soul or cosmic consciousness which directs and guides that energy, and which is the Dianshuanic thought reflecting the ideation of the universal mind. This results in a perpetual series of physical manifestation and moral effects on earth during Manvantaric periods, the whole being subservient to karma. As that process is not always perfect, and since however many proofs it may exhibit of a guiding intelligence behind the veil, it still shows gaps and flaws, and even results very often in evident failures. Therefore, neither the collective host, demiurgos, or any of the working powers individually are proper subjects for divine honors or worship. And man ought to be ever striving to help the divine evolution of ideas by becoming to the best of his ability a co-worker with nature in the cyclic task. In June 2004, Sir Roger Penrose, Emeritus Professor of Mathematics from the University of Oxford, had a discussion at Oxford University with Dr. T.D. Singh, a scientist with a PhD in physical organic chemistry from the Irvine University in California, who is International Director of the Bhaktivedanta Institute. He is a pioneer in advancing the dialogue between science and religion. The subject of the discussion was science, spirituality, and the nature of reality, where Professor Penrose explains that we have two different layers of reality. The small level, which is quantum, and the second one, where classical physics is true. There is a fuzzy borderline between the two, whether we need a new physics, he says. At a larger level, it is not the individual particles, but the entire quantum process that is in some sense cooperative over large areas of the brain, and it is non-local. We know that many things in living systems are far beyond what can be achieved in a laboratory. We are in a position of a little child, he says, entering a huge library filled with books in many languages. The child knows someone must have written those books, but it does not know how, because it does not understand the languages in which they were written. It dimly suspects a mysterious order in the arrangement of the books, but does not know what it is. That, it seems to me, is the attitude of even the most intelligent human being towards the term God. We see the universe marvelously arranged and obeying certain laws, but only understand them dimly. And he quotes Albert Einstein again, who says that quantum mechanics is not the final theory because there is no room for consciousness. It has no place for it yet. There are many things in nature that we do not understand. There's something really deep, very deep, which is mysterious. The advice Sir Roger Penrose gives us is that every person has its own strengths, whatever that may be. Believe in yourself and do not necessarily think that just because somebody is a big professor that he knows all very well what is going on in the world and that you have just to follow his ideas. Often these ideas are fashion-driven, which should not be blindly followed. Perhaps we may never be able to understand the ultimate reality through a rigorous scientific approach. Some fundamental new insights are certainly needed. Try to think for yourself. There's a lot of following other people's thinking. It is very difficult for some people to break out of their mindset, to break into something that is totally new. Are you brave enough to follow your own ideas more truly, he asked at the end of the conversation. Madame Blavatsky gives the same advice in her article Nirvana Moksha, with even stronger words quoting from Buddhist catechism, where the question is asked, are there any dogmas in Buddhism which we are requested to accept on faith? And the answer is no. We are earnestly enjoined to accept nothing whatever on faith, whether it be written in books, handed down from our ancestors or taught by the sages. Our Lord Buddha has said that we must not believe in a thing said merely because it was said, nor in tradition because they have been handed down from antiquity, nor rumors as such, nor writings by sages because sages wrote them, nor fancies that we may suspect to have been inspired in us by a deva, that is in presumed spiritual inspiration, nor from inferences drawn from some haphazard assumption we may have made, nor because of what seems an analogical necessity, nor on the mere authority of our teachers and masters. But we are to believe when the writing, doctrine, or saying is corroborated by our own reason and consciousness. For this, says he in conclusion, not to believe merely because you have heard, but when you believed of your consciousness, then to act accordingly and abundantly. And in the Mahatma letters, we can read that it is plain that the methods of occultism, though in the main unchangeable, have yet to conform to altered times and circumstances, and that the state of the general society in England is unlike that of India and requires quite a different policy in the presentation of occult science. Dr. Deepak Chopra, a pioneer of integrative medicine, which combines conventional Western medicine with complementary and alternative therapies, and Dr. Menas Kafatos, professor of physics, computational science, and engineering at Chapman University in California, wrote in their book, You Are the Universe, Discovering Your Cosmic Self and Why It Matters, that reality is all-inclusive, and that human beings can embrace an infinite variety of what reality has to offer. Reality is filtered through the brain and it's built in limitations. But this does not negate the simple fact that everything we perceive is a mental creation, accumulated over millions of years of evolution. Human beings might be a bright idea the universe had, but why? This can mean only one thing. We allowed the universe to be aware of itself in the dimension of time and space. Quantum physics makes it undeniable that we live in a participatory universe. Our minds are fused with the cosmic mind. The reason why it took so long to arrive at this conclusion is that stubborn materialism. The brain just serves as a doorway to where consciousness lives. Photons strike our retina as we read information, which gets transformed into faint electrical impulses in the brain. Anything a person can say, think, or do can be computerized in the form of a digital code using ones and zeros. Unless the universe is mindful, it is impossible to create a mind out of a mindless creation. Neurons, for example, do not listen to music. We do. Even the most basic elements of consciousness are absent from the brain. It has no idea that it exists. It does not decide what music we would like to listen to on the radio. Our mind does. Consciousness is not in the universe any more than wetness is in the water. Consciousness is there already. Wetness and water coexist. They are inseparable from each other. The secret doctrine says something similar, namely that concrete consciousness cannot be predicted of abstract consciousness any more than the quality wet can be predicted of water. Wetness being its own attribute and the cause of the wet quality in other things. Consciousness implies limitations and qualifications, something to be conscious of and someone to be conscious of it. But absolute consciousness contains the cognizer, the thing cognized, and the cognition, all three in itself, and all three are one. Which parts of our own reality can we change using only our minds that actually make a difference, asked Dr. Chopra and Professor Kafatas. This needs to be defined by a term which the average person has probably never heard of, qualia, a Latin word which means qualities. It points away from physical objects towards subjective experiences. Qualia are the everyday qualities of existence, light, sound, color, shape, texture. They are the glue that holds the five senses together, like the scent of a rose, the velvety texture of its petals and shape, for example. Qualia is everywhere. Nothing happens without them. They are the subjective building blocks of reality. The body is not experienced as cells, tissues, and organs, but rather in different states of awareness. Mind comes first and reaches out to experience reality through qualia, embracing the five senses. The universe is in us. And since qualia occurs in consciousness, they are not limited by physical dimensions. The brain produces images in such a way that it is not inside its tissues. No matter how hard we look, we will not find any image in the brain. It just serves one function. It gives access to the mental space where all concepts, experiences, memories, images, and all qualia resides. Like images on a television screen. They are a play and interplay of electrons. They don't tell us anything about the meaning of the story we see. Only the mind enables consciousness to perceive the meaning. The mind may pause and marvel at how convincing the state of separation can be. The universe is one undivided whole. Its parts, like atoms, galaxies, forces, etc., are qualia or qualities of consciousness. The same place to see the image of a rose in our mind's eye is when nature goes as well, when it creates an actual rose. We participate in the same consciousness that is the universe. A ripe sweet peach, for example, floods the senses with experience and not with numbers or equations. Qualia perfectly matches reality. Experience does not need conceptual frameworks, but is the seed for a new view of nature, transforming the physical universe into a consciousness-based one. Qualia is perceived as insight, intuition, inspiration, and creativity. The organs of perception do not create perception, but are the lens through which consciousness and its qualia create perceptual experience. Feelings like pain, hunger, and emotions cause the body to evolve a symbolic representation, a feedback loop that originates in consciousness, not in the biology of the brain. Consciousness is a field of all possibilities and exists prior to experience. The source of manifestation is beyond space, time, matter, and energy. Human consciousness looking at itself is a mirror of the field of consciousness looking at itself. Evolution is purpose-driven, so each species, as it experiments with the environment and gets feedback. Humans have the gift of self-awareness, coming to terms with its true nature. Self-awareness will be the starting point for the next leap in our creative evolution, said Dr. Chopra and Professor Kafatos, motivated by human aspiration, taking our civilization in the direction of wholeness, healing, and enlightenment. In the last year, we also investigated the illusion of time and the mystery of life at Blavatsky Lodge in 2 lectures under the title Eternal Duration and Moments in Time, and From Darkness to Light, and From Light to Life. Starting with time, which seems to be moving on in a very precise order of seconds, minutes, and hours, and around which our life is organized. We take it for granted, but its mystery has challenged philosophers and scientists alike. Both agree that it is a deception of our senses. Time is only an illusion produced by the succession of states of consciousness as we travel through eternal duration, says the secret doctrine. And it does not exist when no consciousness exists, in which the illusion can be produced, but lies asleep. The present is only a hypothetical mathematical line which divides that part of eternal duration which we call the future from that part which we call the past. Nothing on earth has real duration, for nothing remains without change, or the same for a billionth part of a second. The real person or thing does not consist solely of what is seen at any particular moment, but is composed of the sum of all its various and changes conditions from the appearance in the material form to its disappearance from the earth. No one could say that a bar of metal dropped into the sea came into existence as it left the air and ceased to exist as it entered the water. The bar itself consisted only of that cross-section that separates and at the same time joins the atmosphere and the ocean. Even so of persons and things which, dropping out of the to-be into the has-been, out of the future into the past, present momentarily to our senses a cross-section, as it were, of their total selves, as they pass through time and space as matter, on their way from one eternity to another. And these two constitute that duration in which alone anything has true existence, where our sense is but able to cognize it. So the whole cosmos is a gigantic chronometer in one sense, says the Mahatma Kutumi. Man is the only animal that takes any cognizance of time, although it makes him neither happier nor wiser. Finite similes are unfit to express the abstract and the infinite, nor can the objective ever mirror the subjective. And in a letter, number 20, the Mahatma Kutumi strongly emphasizes that the occult science is not one in which secrets can be communicated of a sudden by written or even verbal communication. If so, all the brothers would have to do would be to publish a handbook of the art, which might be taught in the school as grammar is. The illumination must come from within. No hocus pocus of metaphysical lectures or discussions. No self-imposed penance can give it. All these are but means to an end. And this was and has been no secret for thousands of years. Fasting, meditation, chastity of thought, word, and deed, silence for certain periods of time to enable nature herself to speak to him who comes to her for information, government of the animal passions and impulses, utter unselfishness of intention, have been published as the means since the days of Plato and Iamblichus in the West, and since the far earlier times of our rishis. This always reminds me of the passage in the Voice of the Silence where it says, "Be humble if thou wouldst attain wisdom. Be humbler still when wisdom thou have mastered." In an article for the New York Times called "The Time We Thought We Knew," Brian Greene, an American theoretical physicist, mathematician, and string theorist, professor at Columbia University in New York, wrote that time dominates experience. But what is time, he asks. Certainly a few years into the 21st century, science must have figured out why time seems to flow, why it always goes in one direction, and why we are uniformly drawn from one second to the next. But the fact is that the explanations for these basic features of time remain controversial. The more physicists have searched for definitive answers, the more our everyday conception of time appears illusory. But at the early part of the 20th century, Albert Einstein showed that the wristwatches worn by two individuals moving relative to one another or experience different gravitational fields tick off time at different rates. Numerous terrestrial experiments and astronomical observations leave no doubt that Einstein was right, says Professor Greene, because the flexibility of time passage becomes readily apparent only at high speed, near the maximum possible speed of light, which is about 186,000 miles per second, or in strong gravitational fields near black holes, which remains still a great challenge even for physicists to internalize Einstein's breakthrough from about 100 years ago. Most of us imagine that reality consists of everything that exists right now, that everything would be found like a hypothetical freeze-frame image of the universe at this moment, that the history of reality could thus be depicted by stacking one such freeze-frame image on top of the one that has come before, creating a cosmic version of an old-time flipbook, a remnant of Newton's absolute thinking. But clocks that are in relative motion or that are subject to different gravitational fields tick off time at different rates. Individuals carrying such clocks will therefore not agree on what happens when on the different pages of the cosmic flipbook, even though it provides an equally valid compendium of history. Under these rules, what constitutes a moment in time is completely subjective. Sitting next to each other, our freeze-frame image of the present would be identical. But as soon as one of us were to start walking, the mathematics of relativity shows that the subsequent pages of the flipbook would have happened at different times, some earlier and some later. This realization shattered our comfortable sense that the past is gone, the future is yet to be, and the present, it was truly exists. This is also what the Mahatma Kutumi means when he says in letter 15, "I feel even irritated of having to use these three clumsy words, past, present, and future, miserable concepts of the objective phases of the subjective whole. They are about as ill adapted for the purpose as an axe for fine carving." Most physicists cope with this disparity, writes Professor Greene, that there is time understood scientifically and that there is time as experienced intuitively. The choice of whether to be fully seduced by the phase nature reveals directly to our senses, or to also recognize the reality that exists beyond perception, is ours. And what about life? In the physical science, like biology, life proper starts with a self-maintaining system. Yet Theosophy teaches us that whatever quits the laya or homogeneous latent states becomes active conscious life. But what properties must a system have to be called truly living? Can a clear distinction be made between motion and a living system? What is the precise connection between self-organization and life? These challenging questions were studied and addressed by the two Chilean scientists, Dr. Humberto Maturana and Dr. Francisco Virela. They coined a new word for what defines a living or vital system, autopoiesis, a combination of the two Greek terms auto, which means self, referring to the autonomy of a self-organizing system, and poiesis, sharing the same Greek root as the word poetry, which means making. Autopoiesis therefore means self-making, a peculiar closure of living systems which are alive and maintain themselves metabolically, whether they succeed in reproduction or not. Unlike machines whose governing functions are embedded by human designers, organisms, on the other hand, are self-governing. Autopoiesis emphasizes life maintenance of its own identity. The key characteristic of a living network is that it continually produces itself, a distinct system while being an active part of the network. Through their interaction with the environment, living organisms continually maintain and renew themselves, using energy and resources from the environment for that purpose. The continual self-making includes the ability to form new structures and new patterns of behavior. According to autopoiesis, the mind is not a thing but a process, that the organizing activity of living organisms is mental activity and interaction. Mental processes are immanent in matter at all levels. Learning, memory, decision-making, etc. are mental processes, a necessary and inevitable consequence before organisms develop brains and higher nervous systems. Madame Blavatsky confirms in her Secret Doctrine commentaries that on this, our very same plane, they are not the intellects of men. There are also other intellects and intelligences. Call them what you like. The minds of animals, from the highest to the lowest, from the elephants down to the ant. I can assure you that the ant has in relation to its own plane just as good an intellect as we have. If it cannot express it to us in words, it yet shows high reasoning power, besides and above instinct, as we all know. To say that animals have no intelligence is the greatest fallacy in the world. Mm-hmm. Dr. Maturana and Dr. Varela's concept of what the nature of life and cognition is was called later on the Santiago theory. According to this theory, the brain is not necessary to exist. A bacterium or a plant has no brain but has a mind. Mind and matter no longer appear as two separate categories, but are seen as merely different aspects or dimensions of the same phenomenon of life. It is a continual bringing forth of a world through the process of living. That the process of living itself is a process of cognition, including perception, emotion, and behavior, which does not necessarily require a brain, a nervous system, that even bacteria perceive certain characteristics of the environment. Development is always associated with learning, the two sides of the same coin. Cognition is not a representation of an independent world, but rather a bringing forth of a world where objectively existing structures exist independently, but are part of each other in a network of interdependence. As the complexity of a living organism increases, so does its cognitive domain. The brain and nervous system represent significant expansion of an organism's cognitive domain. At a certain level of complexity, a living organism not only couples to its environment, but also to itself, and thus brings forth not only an external, but also an inner world. In human beings, this process of an inner world is intimately linked to language, thought, and consciousness. Everything in the universe progresses steadily in the great cycle, while incessantly going up and down in the smaller cycles, says the Secret Doctrine. Nature is never stationary during Manvantara. It is ever becoming, not simply being, and mineral, vegetable, and human life are always adapting their organisms to the then reigning elements, and therefore those elements were then fitted for them, as they are now for the life of present humanity. I would like to close with a few paragraphs from an original Aramaic text of the Essene Gospel of Peace, Book 4, The Teachings of the Elect, where it is confirmed what we have just heard. The brotherhood of the Essenes, the Heavenly Father, was law, governing everything in the manifested universe. The earthly mother was nature in its constant adaptation for bringing forth suitable vehicles for the manifestations of life in their countless forms. Jesus emphasized that the communication with the vital forces of sound, light, and life were absolutely essential for our evolutionary process. And he said, when the sun is high in the heavens, then shall you seek the holy stream of sound, for it can only be heard in the silence. It was this sound which formed the earth and the world, and you shall bathe in the stream of sound. For in the beginning of times did we share in the holy stream of sound that gave birth to all creation. Become the sound itself, that the stream of sound may carry you to the endless kingdom of the Heavenly Father, there where the rhythm of the world rises and falls. Let your thoughts before sleep be with the stars, for the stars are light and the Heavenly Father is light. For at the beginning of times the Holy Law said, let there be light, and there was light, and you shall be one with it. One day your body will return to the earthly mother, but the holy stream of life, the holy stream of sound, and the holy stream of light were never born and can never die. Enter the holy streams, that you may reach the kingdom of the Heavenly Father and become one with him. More than this cannot be told, for the holy streams will take you to that place where words are no more, and even the holy scrolls cannot record the mysteries then. And then the elder was quiet, and a great stillness stole over the brothers, and no one wished to speak. The shadows of late afternoon played on the river, still and silvery as glass. And in the darkening sky could faintly be seen the filigree crescent moon of peace. And the great peace of the Heavenly Father wrapped them all in deathless love. Peace be with you.
So beautiful. Thank you so much. I don't even know what to say. That was absolutely, it was extraordinary in so many ways. Sweetheart, thank you, Petra, for putting all of that together. Everything from space and time to where the responsibility lies to be able to access that consciousness, these scientists coming in and being able to validate what we know so far up to this date, these ancient teachings that have come in to help us try to understand who, where, and what we are. I can't thank you enough. There were several times I thought perhaps we could reflect back on one thing, but everything took my breath away, literally. And I am so grateful for you.
It was a lot of information, I know. But you know, since you recorded it, everybody can have a look again, and what is of interest, look again what the scientist says, what Theosophy says, you know, everybody
well, your
can.
voice carries through the entire thing. There may be an issue. Some of the slides may be clipped on this end. I won't find out until after we close the recording. If that is the case, remember Petra's words. She is reading these quotes. She's giving you the text. She's telling you the scientists. She's telling you the philosophers. She's telling you all the information that you need to know to find out more for yourself. It was brilliantly done. I feel, I don't know. I mean, how do you take something that is who, where, what, why we are, and be able to take these teachings that are coming through and have been coming through for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and now you're putting them through our recent science, and they're beginning to recognize each other, and you're pointing that out so beautifully and brilliantly. And in the Mahatma letters, all these things, especially past, present, and future, how useless are these terms? I mean, there was so much in there that I want to cover with you, and an hour and 15 minutes has flown by. I wanted to talk about the magazine Lucifer. I wanted to talk about the consciousness of all beings, of all things, of all atoms, about the discovery of the atom at the end of the 19th century, and that prediction that we began the presentation with. I don't know where to leave off, and I wouldn't know where to begin because I could talk to you forever and ever. Amen. It's just such a beautiful presentation.
Yeah, we also have always to remember that what we do in our meetings, what we can share is only information, you know, and then everybody has to follow up what is his own line of what interests him most, and then you have to find out for himself, because as Mahatma Kutumi pointed out, this is all hocus pocus, he said, you know.
It's true.
The intuition must come from within us, and then we understand, and that is a reflection, meditation, reading it again and again, and until finally something clicks, or somebody says something, or we reach an archetype where we can connect to, and the vibration comes down to us. And you know, it is hard work to do this. You know, we cannot just listen to some information, and if we take it serious, we have to follow it up ourselves. And when we have experienced things or know it intuitively, then it is wisdom. Then we know.
Only through our own application. Yes. It's through what you're listening to. If these things tick a box and you're thinking, oh, I want to find out more, I've always wondered what that meant, then you're in the right place. You're not here by accident. These teachings, these ancient sacred teachings, belong to all of us, and they are the ancient knowledge. This is science, this is spirituality or religion, this is philosophy, this is metaphysics. Very well done in this presentation, weaving this together to explain the unexplainable. Where do we come from? How, what is the function of the brain? How is it that we can find to become these teachings? It isn't just an academic study. You mentioned that in the presentation, talking about these PhDs. They come in, obviously they're supposed to know everything. Each and every one of you who are watching, viewing, or listening to this, you have just as much access to this, for it is within you. And that is what we talk about on this channel. Theosophy is for everyone. It is not exclusive, it is inclusive. It is all time and space. It is all, the explanation that you had of the universe was so brilliant. There were times I was even moved to tears. I don't know what to say, but I would say, listen to this again and again. Pick out the pieces that you find interesting. If you're viewing this, I will include a link to the Blavatsky Lodge, to Petra, to some of the teachings that you can download for free. They're out there, they're available, and more people are looking outside of what they were told once upon a time. I do this because my parents told me to do this, and based on belief. I will tell you, Theosophy is based upon fact. Thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years of nothing but fact. And you can only experience that fact, as Petra so brilliantly said, through your own experience and understanding of applying these teachings. Thank you. Oh, it's just such a fantastic thing. I just am so grateful for you. Petra Meyer, ladies and gentlemen, of the Blavatsky Lodge in London. If there is an issue with the slides, don't worry about that. It wasn't supposed to be. Please listen to the audio that goes with it. Look up these quotes. You see CW, that's the collected writings, SD, Secret Doctrine, all of these, the Mahatma letters, MH, this can all be found on the internet. Another amazing invention that came in at the end of the last century to be able to connect the entire world. So we are here meeting together, working together to bring these teachings out into wherever they can reach, because they will help humanity. They will help all beings on this planet to ease the unnecessary suffering, to understand who we truly are. This is the ultimate service. Thank you for spending this time with me tonight, Petra. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It just seems so paltry. It seems like past, present, and future. It seems like nothing. But thank you is my gratitude is eternal. I'm really grateful. There will be people that come along, whatever year it is that you're coming across these teachings, no matter what day, what hour, it isn't by accident. These are for all of us and for you. So Nature is the church. And you talked about time and space. I mean, I don't even know how to get my head around all of it. I just really am grateful. I'm a voracious student. I love to study and apply, and every day in every way is a way to apply theosophy in every way, and in sleep, in trials, tribulations, daily dramas, everything. Thank you, Petra Meyer. Thank you.
You are welcome.
Is there anything you'd like to say that I haven't covered before we close?
No, I think by studying, we broaden our horizon. And the more we study just one thing, you know, you can concentrate on one subject. And the more you find out about it, not only what I have said, you will find out all kinds of other things when you start to study. And then one day it clicks, and our understanding is much better than if it just comes from one source of information, you know. Also, when we read the Secret Doctrine, you know, just reading it from one page to the other is not very helpful, actually. We said, if we come across a word, let's, for example, mind or universe or whatever, then look in the index where else she has talked about the same subject. And then you get information from all aspects. And finally, there is a picture which becomes clearer and clearer until you get a very better understanding. For example, if you read the poem, you can read it 20 times. And I don't know how many times I read it. Whenever I read it, I find something which I understand better or I have overlooked before or whatever.
I know, and I remember mentioning that to my first theosophical tutor. I said, it's like inside these texts, it's like they're magic, because you read them once and you're thinking, okay, I understand, you put it into your heart, you meditate on it. I visit it again, same page, same paragraph, completely different understanding, completely different. And I thought, okay, well, even with the smaller text, like Light on the Path, as you come in here, I go, I can't believe I didn't see that before. It literally is like a magic box. I think as we evolve and we grow, we understand the same words differently, but never have I come across anything like this in my life. And I remember that was one of the first questions. I thought, how is it that though it is the same text, it has a different outcome? What is this? And I remember he smiled at me and he said, well, this is it's a very interesting thing with theosophy. That's kind of how it works. And I went, tell me more. And I've never stopped saying that. So thank you.
Like me, it's like all of us when we get hooked.
It's true. It is true. And it's to be of service to humanity. That's why we're doing these little videos. It's not going to be a massive audience here. That's not important. What is important is that if you feel something about these teachings, if you hear what was just talked about and it touches you and it resonates with you, then keep looking and keep going. And remember that there's a whole lot of us out there that are doing the same thing. It is for the best interest of all beings on our planet to ease the unnecessary suffering. To live to benefit mankind is the first step. So thank you, Petra Meyer. I love you.
You're welcome.
I hope to see you again. Have a fantastic evening. All the love in the world to you. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you. The same to you.
And hopefully we'll see each other again very, very soon. But that was, I didn't even get a chance to breathe. That was from start to finish. You hit an hour and 15 without missing a beat. So I don't know how to thank you for that. That energy and effort does not go unnoticed. Thank you, sweetheart. And we will see you again. So good night. Good night. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.